Casper Stockham, come on up if you'd like.
Hello everyone, my name is Casper. I think a lot of you know me. Last year, all last year, our capitals and streets were chaos and mayhem going on. They were destroying buildings, tearing down statues, burning buildings, locking police in buildings, trying to kill them. And there was very few, if any, Republicans who spoke out about that. Now, I'm not expecting Democrats to speak out about it because it was their people doing it. But Republicans were not speaking out about it. Fast forward to last week, all of a sudden now, President Trump gives a speech and idiots storm the Capitol, whoever they were, and all of a sudden now Republicans are all outraged. In fact, a lot of them are talking about signing off on the impeachment of our president. So in my mind, the problem is Republicans. I'm just saying. So I really am excited to hear about what Scott and Kristi have to say because that's our problem as far as I'm concerned. So I'm an executive director with American First Republicans. We are a training, support, and advocacy site for grassroots candidates, Republican candidates. We teach them the Constitution, and we also teach them the Republican Party platform. And you say, well, why would you do that? Well, because most Republicans don't follow the platform. So we're going to teach them that. And we're going to get them immersed into the process of running for office, statewide office, whatever, and start to take our state back. So that's what we're about. I've got some cards here available. Right now we have our first class just happened this Saturday. It's going to run for about 5 weeks or so. And there's still room online to sign up for that class. It's a politics and candidate training class. So anyone here is welcome to sign up online. Our in-person class is full, but you can join the conversation online and take that course. And at the end of it, you'll get a certificate. And then we, as American First Republicans, will be considering sponsoring you as a candidate, maxing out to your campaign and helping you reach out into the communities. So if you want to do that, just reach out. I've got cards available. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Casper. Many of you, because you're politically active, will know people who will have the opportunity to vote for the next leadership team of the Colorado State GOP. So please do pay attention. We're going to give maybe 5 minutes each for remarks from each candidate, and if you need a little more time, it's fine. We're not rushed for time, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So I don't have a coin to flip, so I wrote down a number between 1 and 15, known only to myself. Okay, to ladies first to
Absolutely.
pick? 1 to 15.
7.
7?
That was what I was going to
Dang it.
I'll choose 8.
And the number was 11. So you can choose if you want to go.
You're welcome to go first.
All right.
So, Kristi, Burton, Brown? Yeah.
Right.
Well, some people think there's an advantage to open the thing. Others like to listen and then respond. So maybe we'll do a little rebuttal. Huh? That'll teach them to pull a fast one. Anyway, Kristi Burton Brown is our current vice chair, and I know from experience just how hard she worked these last couple of years, and so we'll hear what she's got to say.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for letting me be with you tonight. When I actually got elected vice chairman about 2 years ago, this was the first group I came and spoke to. So it is good to be back. And there are so many questions about what the path forward for the state party is. There's a lot of animosity, understandably so, and mistrust with Republicans, especially seeing the response after the left and the Democrats and the mainstream media chose to blame President Trump for the actions of a few violent individuals. If we want to succeed in Colorado as Republicans and actually have a future going forward, if we want to ever win back a majority in our state Senate, our state House, take the Secretary of State spot away from Jenna Griswold and make sure someone more like Scott is in office. We have to be a bold party. There is no time to sit back, to stand down, to apologize, to admit that, oh, well, yeah, President Trump's rhetoric kind of did get out of hand. No, we don't have things to apologize for. We are Republicans. We are the party who knows why America was founded. We are the party who has stayed true to the principles of American freedom always. We are the party of Abraham Lincoln. We are the party that knows how to chart a path forward. We are the party of the future. Our problem is convincing voters that that's true. My opinion is that one of the things the state party needs to improve the most in is communication. And I don't only mean internal communication among leaders of our counties, our Republican women's groups, our Republican men's groups. I also mean grassroots groups like the Tea Party. I could go down the list for all the grassroots groups that exist in Colorado. Historically, the state party has been hesitant to put out information for people on how to be a part of grassroots groups that actually do the kind of activism people are looking for, especially in the off years. In my view, the state party should be more willing to tell people how they can act today and how they can find people like them so that we can get out and change our communities. In addition to improving communication internally, there's no question that we must communicate for ourselves to voters across Colorado. We can't rely on the mainstream media. It's no surprise to anyone here. Every single media outlet, with the exception of 2 I can think of in Colorado, are not just kind of on the side of the Democrats. They are mouthpieces for the Democrats. And we know this. So we can write as many op-eds as we want, and we still should. We can go on 7 News and 9 News. I just did this week. I went on 9 News. We should do that. But if we rely on that to tell voters what the Republican Party stands for, we will fail and we will lose again because they frame it through the narrative that they set. If you look at President Trump, if you look at AOC, all of our favorite, or if you look at Lauren Boebert, how are they always in the national news? Because they go straight to the voters. AOC goes on her Instagram Live while she cooks dinner. And people love it because she seems like a normal, average person. Of course, we know she's not. But she seems like a normal, average person who does normal, average people things and happens to have a political opinion. Instead of being a bunch of policy wonks ourselves, and I love policy, we need to be more like the average voter. Donald Trump showed us a pathway to be the party of the working class, to be the party that wins the Hispanic voters, which make up 20% of Colorado's population. We can win them, but we have to have a strategy to do it. My guess is that I'm hitting my 5 minutes.
No, you're good.
No? All right.
I'll give you a warning.
Thank you. Okay. So communication for me is going to be absolutely huge as chairman going into 2022. We have a prime opportunity in 2021 in the off year while redistricting is getting finished. We must keep all eyes on the redistricting commission and on what happens. We cannot fail to be involved at every level that we can in redistricting. And as soon as that's over, and the deadline is the end of December, is when they absolutely must have the maps settled. But there's a chance we could get it in the summer. But the point is this, with redistricting happening, we have time to lay out a very specific strategy of how we are going to target the Senate and House seats in Colorado that are revealed to be the most strategic based on the new redistricting. If we don't have that plan in place well before 2022, again, we stand no chance of winning. We have to lay all of the groundwork, all the strategy, all the new communication avenues in 2021.
30 seconds.
We have to join with the effective third-party groups in Colorado and say collectively, what is our strategy to take back the state of Colorado? The state party has a specific lane to play. We have to go on the attack against Polis, against Griswold, against Weiser, against Bennett, and against Dave Young. We should lay the groundwork. Absolutely. Yes, and lay the groundwork for our candidates, whoever they are, to win in 2022. So 2021 is a perfect strategy and communication year, and that is an overview of what I would do. I have many more detailed plans, and I'm happy to talk with any of you anytime. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Scott Gessler. And it's really good to be at a Tea Party event in particular. I sort of grew out of the Tea Party movement in 2009 and 2010, and I'm glad to see the Tea Party still get some respect through Randy and Regina's good efforts. So, looking at the state party and where we are in Colorado, decline is a choice. That is a choice, in my view. And the choices we make determine our success or failure. To be sure, luck plays a part of it, but luck favors the prepared mind. And if you look in the political sense, the waves favor a prepared political party. But we've made bad choices in the Republican Party, many bad choices. And we have not been prepared for the populism and the energy that Trump brought. We weren't prepared in 2014 for the wave there. We've held on by our fingertips for a while, and then it collapsed. As Hemingway once said in one of his characters, how did you go bankrupt? First gradually, then suddenly. And that's what happened to the Republican Party. We have county parties who are dying for help and advice, and their phone calls do not get returned. We have candidates calling out for help. The state party does nothing to help with training. I had a little 527 and trained up 50 people because the party was completely AWOL. We have candidates looking for personnel to hire. They don't exist. We have people looking for help for fundraising for candidates. That doesn't happen either. Our candidates are getting crushed by the progressive Democrat media complex. And where is the Republican Party to help them? It is nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. We have no statewide office holders anymore. None. We are in the worst position as Republicans since Colorado became a state. I actually did the analysis. It's never been this bad for Republicans. And where is the state party leaning forward? They're doing very little, if anything. And I think what they do is pretty much ineffective. We have seen our voter registration numbers decline. Yeah, I know unaffiliates are the biggest number. But we're now down 2 and 3 and 4 points in some of these competitive districts behind Democrats in voter registration. We have lost Republicans. They have moved over to the independent column. We cannot ever retake and be a majority party when we are that far down and continuing to decline and doing nothing to reverse it. These things need to be changed. In my view, the state party has a critical role to play in a resurgence of Republicans. I know, that sounds crazy. The Republican Party has a role to play. We need to go out and recruit candidates. Now, I'm not talking about recruiting candidates in Douglas County. We love our Douglas County Republicans. But here's an example from the last cycle. Weld County. Some of you may remember the name Rochelle Galindo. Lesbian, sexually abused her staff. Recall election was launched against her. She resigned. Everyone raised their arms in victory. What did the Democrats do? They replaced her through the vacancy committee. What did the Republicans do? Nothing. We didn't even have a candidate to run against that replacement. So all this effort for recall, and we don't even have a candidate to run. I could give example after example of that, where we're not even in the game. We need to help with training. I actually did some this last election cycle because the party wouldn't. Every year, our candidates get crushed in fundraising. I don't mean a little bit. I mean 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 in our so-called competitive races. Where's the Republican Party? I know, because I talked to some of these candidates. The Republican Party begrudgingly gives a little bit of money at the end of the election cycle for a few competitive races. And that's it. And of course, on the PR front, where is the Republican Party? Look, the Republican Party is great as a cheerleader for president, and I support that. But the Republican Party can make a difference focusing on the Democratic antics for our local and our state legislative candidates. That's what we need to do. The Republican Party needs to be the attack dog, or should I say the honey badger, okay? And we need to be a strong and powerful counterpoint to the Democrats because they control everything. And we need to move those voter registration numbers. If we're going to do this, we got to raise the funds. Look, half of what the Republican Party chair needs to do is sit on the phone and ask people for money till their brain bleeds out of their left ear. I've raised well over $1 million in this state, but we have to do that because without resources, all we have is rhetoric, and sometimes it's empty.
Go ahead and wrap.
Time is up.
Getting near the 30.
All right. I'm looking forward to questions. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. Been an office holder and was called the honey badger of Colorado politics. Ran for governor. The establishment did not like me, I'm sorry to say. I stepped up and I was the campaign counsel in Colorado for Trump in 2016 when it wasn't popular. And you should have seen trying to recruit other attorneys when no one at that point thought Trump was going to win. But I stepped up and I did it. In this last election cycle, I was honored to be able to work for the Trump campaign again as their expert nationwide in a lot of these election lawsuits. So I know there's been some talk about election integrity. I've dealt with that a lot, and I have a lot of opinions, and I do think that this election, if we have a full investigation, was probably stolen from our president. I will just come right out and say that. And I've seen some of those skunk works. Okay, I've seen some of the crap that those Democrats have pulled. And we have to be prepared for that in Colorado because we have a left-wing progressive Democrat who runs around talking about how Colorado's the gold standard, which I built, by the way. But she is ruining it, and we can easily become Nevada or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, where elections are regularly stolen, and we're stolen this cycle. So I'm looking forward to questions, and thank you always for having us here.
Kristi, you want to take about a minute and a half, because he went over and just kind of
Why not?
Since the party was called out a little bit too.
Yeah,
let's give
no,
you some equal
absolutely.
time. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'd love to. So one thing I think that Scott and I absolutely agree on is building the bench here in Colorado. There's no question we don't have a good field of candidates. Now, I think what's important is to understand what the state party's lane is and what the role of other third-party organizations like the one Scott ran. When he trained candidates, do you know who referred a lot of the candidates to him? The state party. Because we believe groups like the one Scott ran are effective in training candidates and helping them know what's up. One thing I will say, though, is you may have heard of the Trailblazers program, which is run by the state party, to push candidates through, to teach them how to comb through data, to help them understand how to fundraise, to give them lists to call through. In my opinion, it's an ineffective program. As vice chairman, I didn't get a say over the program. I didn't get to create it, but as chairman, I will. And that is something that would majorly change under me as chairman. We have not run the kind of programs we should for candidates, and we have to improve that while working with successful third-party groups to let them do what they do best and build a network around our candidates so that they can succeed and beat the progressives that would like to rule our state. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll start off questions, but if you've got them, we'll get to go for hands in a second. I always think that personnel is policy.
Absolutely.
So I guess my question for both of you is, who are you going to surround yourself with? Have you thought about vice chair, executive director, some of those folks? I guess we'll let you go first since you went first before.
All right. So vice chair and secretary isn't actually selected by the chair. They get to run their own race. I'm excited to see people jump into those races. And as chairman, I believe you should use your vice chairman's and you have singular, one vice chairman. You should use that person and your secretary to spread around the state and show that the state party can be everywhere and can go to every county. We did do that, and that's why I had an opportunity to travel all around the state of Colorado as a vice chairman. I believe we should continue to do that. As far as executive director, I will pick someone with a background in communications. That is absolutely vital. If we do not put someone with expertise in communications in that spot, in 2021, we have very little chance of actually changing that strategy in Colorado. I will also pick someone who is liked by both wings and all factions of the party because they know how to get things done. They are kind, they are personable, and they backed President Trump. And they're not going to disown him.
Thank you. I agree with Kristi, certainly with respect to the vice chair and secretary. I'm not running as a slate with anyone. They're independently elected, and I'm looking forward to whoever gets elected. As far as executive director, to be frank, I don't have anyone that I am intending to hire as an executive director right now. But let me tell you a little bit about my process and the type of job description. Okay, so let's talk about process, and I'll give you an example. So I became Secretary of State in early 2011, had a substantial amount of expertise as a former election attorney, and I had to choose a new deputy director, or deputy secretary of state with my one political appointment back then. And I knew everyone who was involved in elections in Colorado. I knew everyone, most of whom, well, certainly all the Republicans, were friends of mine who I liked. I did not choose a single one of them, because even though I liked them, I didn't think they were proper for the job. So I actually went out, even though this was a political appointment, did a full sort of search. And I wound up with two finalists. One was a guy who had been in the Bush administration, and afterwards, the general counsel for the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, when it was a conservative group. Lots of credentials, solid guy. The other one was a woman who had been a city attorney in Littleton. She sued, she got fired, and she sued Littleton for sexual harassment. A woman named Suzanne Steyer, you may have heard of. And I did that analysis, and I looked at her, and she was damn right in that lawsuit. She was treated like crap. And she was the right person, and she was a warrior. And I chose her over the credentialed guy. And I chose her even though I wasn't friends and didn't know her. She wound up being an exceptional deputy secretary of state. She served for 7 years. She was a warrior, one of the best conservative public servants I think we've ever had in Colorado, in my view. She was a great candidate this last cycle, if you know her. That's the quality of people I choose. As far as what I'm looking for, I differ a little bit. I'm looking for an executive director who's focused on the nuts and bolts and mechanics of making the trains run on time, making sure these candidates and parties are getting their support, making sure we're deploying assets as appropriate for our elected officials and for our candidates as well. Making sure that the communications trains are running on time, making sure we've got a voter outreach and registration program. That's what I'm looking for in an executive director. And what I would hire is a solely focused, with laser focus, communications director who's highly skilled, and he or she spends all of their time on the communications side, focused on how do we take the wood to the Democrats every day of every week. So I'll have those two groups, two functions separate.
You're not just going to select from the traditional genders, though, are you?
Mine will
That's not a real question.
probably be a binary choice, is what I'm saying, shall I?
All right, who's got questions for one of the candidates? We'll start in the back with Mike.
Thank you, Randy. And by the way, I didn't have a chance to express my condolences on your mom's death.
Thank you.
Both Sarah and I were thinking about you, praying for you. So, your mom's saying like a wonderful person, and she's in a lot better place right now. Thank you.
Amen. Isn't anybody who's not American?
So here's my question to both of you. Randy and I were actually at Colorado Christian University in 2018 after we got our butts kicked and listened to, with respect, John Andrews talk about how it really wasn't that bad because we could work with the Democratic Party. The chairman was coming up from Pueblo, good guy, I guess. Everybody get along with them, no problems. Let's just kind of see where it goes. Respectfully, in my view, that is over. We cannot be working with the Democratic Party. Since a lot of our Republican friends have the money, but are of the old school, what do you each plan to do with extracting the money and getting them away from the old school?
I'll start. I don't think it's that hard, and here's why. Look, I mean, the role of the party, from a public stance and whatnot, is to be the attack dog. I mean, if we need to have compromises, the legislators can do that. That is not the role of the party. We do not get on board with what Democrats are doing. No, we're not doing that, okay? And what I have found, and again, I come from the Tea Party movement, so, I'm a bomb thrower. Some of you knew my mom. I would joke, I'm sort of like my mom with a thin veneer of civilization. Very thin, okay? And that's where my heart is. But at the same time, with my sort of educational and military background, a lot of the establishment looks at me and they say, well, he's not that much of a knuckle dragger. And so I've always been able to obtain the respect, I think, from the different wings of the party. And this is how I do it, at least. First of all, I don't trash Republicans. Now and then I do, when I just really just blow my top. And that happens about once every 4 years with one person, now and then. But I really don't go around trashing other Republicans. And that's not my goal. You've heard me criticize the state party. And I don't mean to infer any criticism of Kristi. I know Randy had mentioned that. That's not my goal here, okay? Or imply any criticism. That's not my role. And I understand that even those sort of establishment Republicans, you know, in Denver, Inglewood, ones who have money and whatnot, they share our values like 95%. And Reagan once said, you know, my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. I'd even go so far as to say they share it about 95%. And I know that, because even now in my run, I'm talking to them all the time. Let me tell you, they are pissed as well. They are furious. Now, they have a different tone and tenor than a lot of the grassroots. But if we respect and understand those commonalities, that's valuable. And then the other point is, this approach, I'm not talking about I'm going to do this, or it may happen, or this is my theory. I've done it. I've raised money from these folks on a regular and consistent basis. And I've gone to them and I've said, hey, this is what I want. And what they want, I think, are the same things you want. I want someone who's going to fight, someone who has a plan, and someone who has a record and the capability of executing against that plan. That's what we need to do to raise money from them. And I think we can do it, and I have done it.
Kristi.
Thank you. All right, so money is absolutely essential for the operation of the state party. Everyone knows that. Here's one thing that not everyone does know. In 2020, under Chairman Ken Buck, we set a fundraising record at the state party. We raised nearly $2 million. That is a record for the state party. However, did we win? No, we didn't. Money is not the only answer to winning. If we can pair money with a successful communication strategy and the way to get out there and actually talk to voters ourselves, not through the lens of the mainstream media, that's when money is successful. Now, specifically to your question, Mike, how do we get these more establishment donors to agree that we need a new strategy here in Colorado and that it's not just play as normal and play nice with the Democrats? I already have commitments that major donors in Colorado, who are probably those types, in fact, are for sure those types, will back my strategy of changing the communication in the state party. And the state party playing its lane, being partisan, attacking the Democrats, laying the groundwork for our candidates to go after Polis, to go after Griswold, to go after that entire list. We will make it easier for our Republican candidates in 2022 because we'll take the money from those donors and we will attack the Democrats with it. They already have bought into my strategy. They are willing to put money behind it. I know that if I come in as chairman and execute this communication-focused strategy that aids our candidates before they even get selected through our primaries, there are donors who will absolutely back it, and they've already committed to it.
Come over here. Yeah, you.
Yeah. How are we going to understand the Democrat strategy? They have obvious open source information, a typical playbook that we always are shell-shocked and don't respond to. So how are we going to understand their strategy and respond effectively instead of turning around and running away?
Well, part of that goes to not always playing defense. And that is one thing Republicans do way too much. We're always responding, we're always reacting, we're always playing defense. And we don't have an offensive, go run your strategy, we're gonna run ours. And it's based on data, it's based on statistics, it's based on communication strategies that actually worked. One of the reasons that I'm so focused on communications is I'm a constitutional attorney, but my background is also in media and communications. I worked for a pro-life organization that actually grew itself bigger than Planned Parenthood and every other organization on the issue of abortion, both on the pro-life and pro-choice side, on social media. It is literally the biggest organization, even though it has been censored. Again and again by Facebook and Twitter, they still managed to grow themselves to have the loudest voice and the biggest reach on that issue. I worked for them. I learned how to do that with them. And so it's those kind of offensive strategies that no matter what the Democrats do, we can't be controlled by them. We need to listen to what they're doing, get good intel, have people who can get into the Emerge program and figure out everything they tell those people. That'd be great. But instead of only responding to their Emerge program, we have to have our own.
We don't even respond.
Well, I can guarantee you I would. Yeah, and I disagree with that. I don't know. I was on the Capitol show last week. I got to host it all week, and I talked through a lot of the things that happened this week. One of the worst things we do is we don't get our opinions out there, and that's what I'm talking about, going straight to the people, saying you don't have to guess from the media or happen to get our email to hear what we think. We're going to be in front of you all the time, so you're not going to miss the message straight from Republicans. So.
Scott?
Sure. So I'm going to be a little hard-nosed in saying this. I think Republicans have been idiots, and we don't know what the hell we're facing a lot of times.
That's true.
Right.
Okay? And let me tell you some of what we're facing. Anyone ever hear of a group called IRN? No. It's funded by Pat Stryker. It's got about, it varies anywhere from 10 to 18 employees. And they spend all their time investigating us. I will guarantee you, I believe likely there is someone from that group in this audience. Okay? I testified in Nevada for the Trump campaign during my deposition, for deposition testimony. On my cross-examination, they pulled up a video of a Broomfield County Tea Party meeting from 2012 and a joke that I said, tried to use that against me. It was ineffective. But they keep that stuff
Was it
forever.
funny?
It was actually very funny.
The joke was.
It was a great joke. Okay? They're investigating us all the time and following us. During this last, remember the recall summer we had? For one of the recall efforts in Colorado Springs, they had infiltrated that group. They were on the strategy calls of where to deploy the our signature collectors. I say our, the movement signature collectors. They would then send Democrats or operatives to start a fight with the signature collectors so that the owner, like a Safeway or whatever, would just get mad at everyone and kick them all off the property. That's the type of stuff they do. Our candidates need to emotionally understand that their Facebook feeds have been infiltrated, that stuff will be used against them all the time. Look at Grady Newis, what he had to face. Okay? Jeff Toberg down in Parker just got hammered for some of his comments. We have to do better at message discipline, and the way we're better at message discipline is learning the threat and understanding that. Okay, and you don't have, it's not just intellectually, emotionally, you need to know that these people are looking after you all the time, at you. And then on message training, people need to practice responses. Look, I mean, we can be conservative, and we can be edgy, but you got to practice responses. And I will tell you my experience, one example. I use examples all the time, okay? Because I like to believe, now that I've gotten older, bad judgments lead to good experience, but leads to good judgment. So I like to think I'm in the third category. When I was opposing House Bill 1303 in 2013, which created all-mail voting and same-day voter registration, I was up there testifying. And one of the legislators said to me, Democrats, said, Secretary Gessler, you've said that lazy citizens shouldn't have the opportunity to vote. Isn't that true? And I was like, no, I don't think I ever said that. And she says, well, let me read to you a radio transcript. And she looks down the radio transcript, and then she's like, oh, well, you're not the one who said that. And then the whole audience cracks up, and the chair bangs her gavel and says, quiet or I'll kick you out. But here's what happened. I was on talk radio, okay, with Michael Brown, great guy, Michael Brown show. And he's like, Secretary Gessler, don't you think that these, that voters who are too lazy to learn about what's going on, they probably shouldn't vote, they shouldn't be involved because they're not spending time learning that. That's what he said. And how did I respond? I didn't agree with him. I never said yes, but I said, well, the way I look at it is this. And so that's how you learn how to respond to this stuff, because they are watching that, they are recording it, they are taking transcripts, they've got the capability to put that in front of the people who can embarrass you. And so that's what we need to do. We need to understand the threat. It is a huge threat. They infiltrate, they monitor all the time. And if we don't understand that, we know what's going on, we will continue to get just banged up.
Casper.
So our numbers statewide, voter registration numbers are going in the wrong direction. And I've been crying out about this for 8 years. And I've spoken to every state chair that has been there for the past 8 years. And now, what I was telling them 8 years ago is now a reality to where it's difficult to win a statewide race ever again if we don't get our numbers up.
Mm-hmm.
So, my question is, both of you guys, how do we get our numbers up? How do we get more registered Republican voters voting?
So I'll start since that's my turn. Now look, I'm not supposed to say this, but I don't have a concrete plan for that right now.
Okay, well I do.
Okay, and you and I have talked about this. We have sat down and talked about this. Here's what I will say though, okay? Part of it's elbow grease, part of it's messaging, and part of it's just getting out there and doing it, even though it's never been done before, through trial and error. Now, if you look at Texas, the reason why Texas went for Trump this year, and there's a lot of belief in this, is because of a voter registration program that registered Republicans that made up that difference. And there were two components to it. There was a paid component, and there was a volunteer component that was run by the party. The paid component cost about $78 per registration. The volunteer component cost about $7 per registration. It still cost money, but it was doable. There are benchmarks out there, and I've spoken to people about this and talked to consultants and like, all right, well, what did you do and how does this work? And I think some of the answers have been good and many have been terrible. But there are benchmarks out there for success and we need to do it. Look, here's my approach. We gotta crack this nut, and in particular, as someone from Denver, we gotta crack the urban nut. Because we are not gonna win if Denver and Boulder and some of these towns are blowing us out of the water 80-20, 93 or 83-17. That's how we lost I was down in Georgia. I was part of the war room for the Senate elections. And that's how we lost. We got blown out of those highly populous Democratic counties. And Casper, you and I have talked about cracking the urban nut and reaching out to minority groups and disaffected people. First step, we reach out to our disaffected people and we get them back in the Republican tent. That's the first step. And then we dig out new Republicans as well. First, getting people back in the tent, and then the persuasion efforts are the second priority. But that's what we need to do.
Kristi.
All right. So I would say one thing that we could make the mistake of over-focusing on is telling everyone who we want to vote for us that they need to be a registered Republican. I want them to be registered Republicans, 100%. Do I think we can eventually get them there after a cycle or two? Absolutely. But our message should actually be that even if you are an unaffiliated voter, why should you actually vote Republican? Voting Republican rather than registering Republican, in my view, is what has to happen this cycle so that we lay the groundwork of registering more people. And let me even let's specifically get into the numbers in Colorado with registering voters. Colorado is actually one of the hardest states to get out there and produce new voter registrations on because of the new laws the Democrats passed, where when you register for a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote. And unless you choose an affiliation, and some people don't even know they're being registered, you're automatically registered as an unaffiliated. And a lot of those people are people who aren't necessarily going to be persuaded by someone coming to them and saying, you need to register as a Republican, especially when we consider the image of the Republican Party in Colorado. We have a lot of work to do with breaking stereotypes and convincing people to vote Republican. And Colorado is going to continue to be one of the hardest states to register Republicans in because we have an incredibly high voter registration number among our population anyway. We are one of the most highly voter registered states in the entire nation. I can also tell you that in this last cycle, the staff that was hired by the Trump campaign to come into Colorado focused very heavily on voter registration. They went into churches to register voters. They went into communities. Most people you encounter are already registered to vote. It is going to take a unique strategy in Colorado to increase that, but I think we're going to find far more margin in winning for our candidates if our focus is actually on getting people to vote Republican, since the majority of them are already registered. The other point I want to make in relation to this is when we look at Denver, yes, and other urban areas, we absolutely could go register more people as Republicans. But a big, huge problem, Republicans in Denver, by and large, don't vote. because they think it's lost. They think it's pointless. They don't think voting as a Republican in Denver actually sways the state. And they don't realize that giving us more of a margin in Denver actually does push our candidates over the edge if they would do that. So that's another thing we have to focus on, is getting Republicans in urban areas to believe that their vote matters.
So how do we do that?
We have to have, that's where I believe the state party needs a very intentional and successful relationship with county chairs. And I've been able to develop that as a vice chairman. A lot of the county chairs go to me for their first phone call because they know I'm responsive, they know I work with them, and that's what we need in Denver, is a great relationship between the state party and that county chairman, and a coalition focused on literally state volunteers going into Denver and turning those people out, convincing them their vote matters.
You want to respond to that, her question?
How do we get it? What was the question exactly? Okay.
Well,
How do we persuade?
How do we persuade
Denver registered
Denver
Republican
Republicans
voters to vote?
So how do we, well, there was a second
There was another question.
So.
Hey, I'll run this mess.
I'm taking my orders from Randy. Look, I'm just telling you that. Look, I live in Denver, and I've lived in Denver for 15 years, and I've been very involved with the Denver Republican Party for a long time there, although I've not held office. And a lot of it, I guess I disagree in the sense Denver Republicans aren't voting because they don't think that their vote will make a difference on the state. That's not what's going on. I think what's going on is we have to do better outreach, and we have to get out there and talk to them. We actually had a slew of good candidates in Denver, but let's talk about Denver. When I ran for Secretary of State, 2009, 2010, you know what I would have loved? I would have loved someone from Denver to say, Scott, here are the 18 influential people in Denver you need to talk to. They may be Democrats, they may be Republicans. These are the ones you need to talk to. We are flying blind. I actually asked Secretary of State, went out and spoke to a number of black churches. Let me tell you, they were incredibly responsive and incredibly respectful. And I didn't talk as like the Republican. I mean, I talked on, voting and the electoral franchise over the years. But there's ways to build bridges there, and we need to understand those structures in Denver far better. I've been working with some groups that are outside of the party about doing that, but just that intelligence and that understanding of who do you talk to? Who are the influential people? How do we work those social networks? Republicans are blind. They're working on it, but they're blind in Denver, and and that's what causes us problems.
We're going to do a couple more questions. Diane?
My biggest fear is that without getting Dominion voting audited.
Speak loudly because we're recording.
Can I speak loud?
Speak loudly.
I can hear.
Well, we've never been accused of not speaking loud. Okay. Without doing something about the Dominion voting systems, I'm afraid that any and all good work will only have a 50% effective rate, or 60% effective rate, or it could fail totally. And I don't know how we get to that or around that, or we'd have to have like twice as many people vote Republican and as ever voted in the last election, and they still might find a way to, because I believe, it's rigged here.
Kristi, I think you're first on Dominion.
Sure. I'm happy to take that. I think there's a couple aspects to that. One, we saw in Georgia what happens when people believe an election is rigged and therefore don't get out and vote. We have to prevent Republicans and conservatives in Colorado from failing to vote because they believe the election is rigged, or I guarantee you we're going to lose whether it's rigged or whether we just don't get the votes. So we have to, and the state party has responsibility to prevent that from happening, from people believing their vote is worthless and there's no reason to try anymore and they shouldn't do that. So that's one side of it. On the other side, as you may imagine, as vice chairman of the party, you don't get to make all the decisions of the party. I love Ken Buck, work really well with him. However, he and I did differ on the state party's stand on how to handle election integrity, and Ken knows this. I believe the state party should have joined our county parties in Jefferson and Boulder who called for forensic audits of the Dominion voting machines. That would not have hurt us to ask for that. We should have asked for that. We should have stood by our counties. Those 2 county chairmen, very skilled, know what they're talking about when it comes to election integrity. They have a lot of people on the ground. They've done it for years. They know what they're talking about. And they were right to request a forensic audit. Now, would they have gotten that from the Boulder and Jefferson County Clerk's office? I think we know the answer to that. They asked for it and they were denied. However, there's a lot I actually can't say, especially because this is being recorded, but there are absolutely plans in the works to ensure that the state party focuses on election integrity and works with the chairs who know what they're talking about, spreads their knowledge and ability to focus on election integrity and find any fraud that exists around the state. These chairmen who are very skilled at that want to spread their program around the state to help other counties know how to catch fraud when it happens, because if we caught it sooner in many instances, we'd be able to challenge it. That's a huge issue. So the state party should spread those kind of committees around the state. I absolutely am planning on doing that. And then there's a lot of behind the scenes work we can do to figure out what really went on and pursue the idea of forensic audits. Again, I think that work needs to be behind the scenes, and I'd be happy to talk about it in personal conversation.
Sort of frustrating. You asked Secretary of State and I left, and now things are falling to shit.
Should have stayed.
Yeah. Look, here's how we audit Dominion. Under the Colorado Open Records Act, we're able to get ballots, and we're able to get ballot images up to 25 months after the election. I've worked with Nick Liebenstein in Broomfield already, and he has the ballot images from the 2018 election. And obviously, we have time to get it for the 2020 election. Once we have those images, we count them. What I've encouraged some of the clerks to do, or some of our county party chairs, and I know they've spoken to the clerks, is to be able to get a company called Clear Ballots. So here's how it works. In Colorado, 60 counties have Dominion. 2 do hand counts. They're like the really super small counties. And then 2 do Clear Ballots. So Clear Ballot and Dominion are the 2 systems we have in the state of Colorado. Clear Ballot is used in, I know I'm a geek on election integrity. This is what you need. In Douglas and Garfield, Clear Ballot started off as an auditing company. That's what they started as. So they can take ballot images, they can take ballots from other companies and run them through the equipment, their equipment, to see how the tabulation occurred. Because tabulation, that's the most verifiable part of an election. So I know Broomfield is looking to do that, and we already have the ballot images there. I know Jeffco's been working on it. Merle down in Douglas County, he's willing to sort of push Clear Ballot to help out. If that fails, you can always do a hand recount. That's tough. It takes a lot of effort and time. I did it before. When I was Secretary of State, I had to sue a county clerk in order to go in there and audit and do a hand recount of what the ES&S system. So I know of what I speak here, and I'm fine talking about it. And so that's what we need to do where possible. That will enable us to do one of 2 things. We'll either say, okay, well, Dominion did it straight, or there truly was massive election fraud, or maybe some election fraud, with respect to the tabulation process. And I think we need to do that in order to restore confidence. I believe, and I have spoken to him, Chuck Broman, the clerk and recorder down in El Paso County, we'll see if he does it, but he may be doing that exact process for his ballots for the 2020 election, for the presidential campaign for El Paso County, to run them through this auditing. The good thing that we have in Colorado is we have paper ballots. Okay, we do risk limiting audits. They're actually the most sophisticated in the country, and they've shown that Dominion's okay. But I still think that a full audit would be appropriate. And when I say audit, I don't mean like a risk limiting audit. I don't mean taking a couple. I mean looking at every single ballot and recounting every single ballot. So I've done that before when I had the authority as Secretary of State. I know how we need to do it. With respect to Boulder, they have, their volunteer efforts were the most sophisticated I've seen in 20 years, what their party has done. They actually did great work, really good work. And I worked with them while they were doing it and helped them out. And I think that, and they're motivated, and we need to replicate that for our major counties, certainly up and down the Front Range, maybe Mesa as well. Look, Pueblo's a hot mess, always has been. El Paso's run pretty well. I used to have a lot of confidence in Jeffco and Arapahoe. We now have nut jobs running those elections, clerks and recorders, so we have problems there. But we can look at these on an individual basis and find solutions.
What's it cost to get counties switched to Clear
What's it cost to get counties switched to clear ballot? I don't have those numbers offhand, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't know.
I think we're going to stop it there because we do have some other speakers and some other things we want to do tonight. Would both of you guys like to take just a minute to sum up?
Sure.
All right. I think you went first, so why don't you go first and she'll close us out.
Okay. What makes me feel good is that, there's a lot of energy here in Tea Party, okay? And I want to thank you for being here. I think the party operations need an overhaul. When I took over as Colorado Secretary of State, it was sort of a sleepy backwater of an office that now and then got people's attention. But it didn't do a whole lot, and people didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. When I was in there, I turned that office into a national leader, probably the national leader under my tenure as far as elections. I launched new programs. I was the first guy in the country ever to start going after illegal and non-citizens who were on our voter rolls. I'm the only one who came up with solutions on that. So not only did I turn it into a national leader, but I turned it into a vibrant, forward-leaning, conservative policy organization that got more media attention than even the governor for several years while I was there. And the reason I did that is because of fearlessness, is because of determination, and the willingness to put in the hard work to understand how this stuff works so that you can be strategic and thoughtful and successful in it. No one in the state of Colorado, with the exception, I would say, of Cory Gardner, has dealt with the media more and dealt with media hostility and dealt with a swamp than I have. No one. And I've watched things decline over the last several years, even more, and it's been very difficult to watch. And I am determined to turn that around. So that's who you're getting. I'm like straight up front. You're getting someone who is gonna not throw sand in the gears, but rip out the gears and replace every damn one of them if I have to. Maybe not all of them, but I'm not afraid to do it. I'm not afraid to make change. I'm determined, and I will make it successful. My kids live in this state. I was born in Detroit. My parents moved from there after the race riots. I grew up in Chicago. That's a little bit why I'm sort of hard-nosed sometimes. All right. I moved here 23 years ago because I knew that was not a place of opportunity, and sure enough, it's fallen to pieces. And that's not going to happen in Colorado. Not on my watch, and not while I'm here. And with your help, we will make sure it doesn't happen. Thank you.
Kristi, bring it on.
All right. In order to win in Colorado, there's no question that the Republican Party needs to operate in a lean way so that more money can get directed to our candidates, and in a loud way so that we are not ashamed of what we stand up for and how we express it. If we want to win in this state, we also have to rely on relationships that we have. By that, what I mean is the relationships with county chairs. They're the ones who get the stuff done in their counties. They're the ones who activate the volunteers on the ground and who talk to their candidates, or at least should be talking to their candidates, every day or every week in the middle of election season. I have built those relationships with county chairs. They know me, they trust me, I have traveled the state. I can help them bring it home in 2022 and reform the state party in a way where our voice is trusted and loud, and people know not just that we make a bunch of noise that they should vote Republican, but exactly why they should vote Republican, and why suburban moms who are my age, who live in the suburbs just like me, who have kids in school just like me, should actually vote Republican if they care about their kids' futures. We have to talk about local issues like that and teach our candidates how to do it if we want to succeed. We also do have to rely on relationships that the state party has built with elected officials. I have worked for Ken Buck, Doug Lamborn, and Lauren Boebert, all three of our currently elected Republican congressmen and women here in Colorado. I know them all. I trust them all. We can work together to change the state party. We have to rely on our relationships in the House and in the Senate and work with our minority leaders in both of those chambers so that they become majority leaders. I used to work in the state Senate as a policy analyst, helped negotiate the free speech bill that Senator Tim Neville sponsored. Got to negotiate it with CU, which was a lot of fun, trust me. But those are the kind of relationships a state party must have and keep. And it must have relationships with grassroots groups and not be afraid to push our people, our volunteers, and our activists to groups like the Tea Party, to other third party and C4 and C3 groups that do good work in our community, and give a face to the compassionate policies that Republicans stand for and the bold voice that we will never deny if we're going to keep America free as it always has been. That's my vision for the State Party, transforming how we communicate, how we build relationships, and how we direct more money to our candidates so that they can use it to win their races. Thank you all so much.
All right, and so now so we can talk about you guys, we'd like for you both to leave.
Just make sure you give those videos to the Democrats so I can be cross-examined on them. Then next time I'm an expert for the Trump campaign.
That's a lot more than I charge Republicans, but I'm open to the possibility.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it.